This is WAB's Week in Review, the show where we look back the last few days of stories from your WAB News team. I'm Alex Helmick, managing editor of WAB News. And today we start with Georgia Governor Brian Kemp saying he will not delay the May 19th party primaries to allow for a special session to redraw congressional and state legislative lines following a U.S. Supreme Court decision that advocates say weakens the Voting Rights Act. WAB's Raul Bali reported Kemp did say, though, the lines should be redrawn for the 2028 elections.
State Senator Greg Dolezal, who's running for lieutenant governor, is one of the Republicans calling for that special session.
The last thing that Republicans need to do is be weak-kneed in this moment. This is a time to be bold. This is a time to be aggressive.
The previous interpretation of the Voting Rights Act stopped states from using redistricting to dilute the voting power of minorities. But by the new standard the conservative-leaning U.S. Supreme Court set this week, someone challenging gerrymandering would have to prove intentional racial discrimination. An NPR analysis done before the ruling found affecting provisions of the Voting Rights Act would put all 5 Democratic-held congressional seats in Georgia at risk. A dilution of Democratic seats could expand Republicans' current 9-5 U.S. House seat advantage. There's also the matter of the state House, where Republicans have 99 seats. 91 are needed to hold a majority. If they lose seats or even the majority in November, a special session could be called later in November or December to redraw the lines. Any redrawing could also add Republican state Senate seats. That being said, the Supreme Court decision could also mean the start of a long legal battle. Raul Bali, WABE News.
The Flint River keeper is suing the City of Griffin for allowing polluted wastewater and sewage into a tributary of the Flint River. As WABE's Marissa Mecki told us, the Flint serves as a drinking water source for South Metro Atlanta.
Flint River keeper Gordon Rogers says Griffin, like a lot of cities, has stormwater leaching in through cracks in its pipes and increased use and burden on its sewage system. Because of that, he says,
the system between infiltration due to age and oversubscription, I'll call it, is belching sewage under the right rainfall conditions.
It's caused several untreated sewage spills into the Potato Creek Basin, which flows directly into the Flint River, a drinking water source for downstream communities. Rogers says his organization has worked with the City of Griffin, and he does believe the city in good faith wants to resolve the problem. But he says there's financial problems.
They've done the engineering, they've done the budgeting, and then when they got everything out for bids, it just blew their budget out of the water in terms of what they were able to do through bonding.
He says this lawsuit is more like a backstop.
In case they get, buyer's remorse, deer in the headlights, whatever you want to call it.
And doesn't resolve the issue. He says Flint River Keeper is hoping for a settlement and to get an early resolution on the repairs needed for these sewers. The City of Griffin declined to comment on this ongoing litigation. Marissa Mecki, WABE News.
Georgia U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff is calling on the federal government to provide adequate care for pregnant, unaccompanied children in the immigration system. WABE's Emily Wu Pearson explained this comes after reports they're being routed to a Texas shelter.
Reporting from NPR member stations in California and Texas revealed the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the federal agency in charge of all pregnant, unaccompanied immigrant children, regardless of if they are refugees or not, changed its policy in 2025 to detain them all in a shelter in San Benito, Texas. Local advocates told journalists at the Texas newsroom the shelter lacks necessary medical care for the pregnant minors who are all at high risk. They say the shelter is hours away from any medical center that could provide appropriate care. Ossoff is calling for the agency to stop sending pregnant children to the single facility and instead prioritize their access to health care. Emily Wu Pearson, WABE News.
Georgia's Secretary of State says the first day of early voting last Monday saw a record turnout for a midterm primary election. More than 35,000 people cast a ballot. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger says that's a 29% increase from the 2022 primary. In-person early voting runs through May 15th. In what will likely be a very high turnout election, you can find polling locations, candidate profiles, debates among many candidates, and other election-related content at our website, wabe.org/2026election. Well, the 2026 Men's World Cup is set to be the first to feature FIFA's new human rights requirements. They're meant to put host cities in charge of protecting the rights of vulnerable communities that may be affected by the event. It comes after the global soccer organizing body was heavily criticized for violating the human rights of construction workers in Qatar during the 2022 World Cup. So far, only a handful of the 16 host cities have made their human rights action plans public. One of them is Atlanta. As WAB's Marlon Hyde reports, though, the plan may not be enough to protect immigrants during the World Cup.
When Atlanta began crafting its strategy to protect the rights of people ahead of the World Cup, officials organized a get-together with community groups in the atrium of City Hall.
And we want to have a conversation tonight about what you want to see reflected in the plan.
Attendees brainstormed and wrote suggestions on colorful sticky notes, placing them on poster boards.
Atlanta was very much excited to do ours, right? We believe this is our legacy.
That's Atlanta's Chief Equity Officer, Candace Stansel, who oversaw the creation of the city's human rights plan.
FIFA gave us a framework to respond to try to create some alignment across all the cities participating in FIFA.
That framework asks cities to protect the rights of their vulnerable communities. That includes local and migrant workers, and they must have a way to file grievances related to the FIFA World Cup. It starts in June and is being played in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. Atlanta is hosting 8 matches, including a semifinal. Atlanta's plan includes programming for LGBTQ people, more homeless outreach, fair pay for workers the city hires, and the prevention of human trafficking.
Everyone had high hopes because the human rights requirements were baked in.
That's Minky Worden with Human Rights Watch, which tracks FIFA human rights plans that cities are publishing. With the World Cup over a month away, they've only seen a handful and are disappointed.
None of these so-called human rights action plans even mentions the word ICE.
Host cities must publish their plans before the first match begins. Toronto and Boston say they'll publish their plans in May. Other cities have not returned requests for published dates, including Miami.
Miami leads nationwide in ICE arrests.
Yareliz Mendez-Zamora is with the American Friends Service Committee, which works on immigration and justice issues in Miami. Without a plan for communities to see, she's concerned arrests of immigrants going to see soccer matches could increase.
It's an interesting feeling of having both hope and despair exist at the same time. I am so happy that, people are excited about the games, and yet you can still feel the despair.
It's not clear how a city could keep ICE arrests at bay during the World Cup. The city of Atlanta said in a statement that it is coordinating with the consulates of participating countries to support international visitors. Earlier this year, Mayor Andre Dickens said he has no control over ICE during the tournament.
So I can't predict what the federal government will attempt to do at 11 sites of World Cup matches across the United States. We hope that their presence will be small, unnoticeable, negligible, invisible, and maybe non-existent.
Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch is calling on the federal government for an ICE truce, a moratorium on enforcement measures during the World Cup. Marlon Hyde, WABE News.
You're listening to WAB's Week in Review with me, Alex Helmick. Well, Greene County now has its first historical marker dedicated to an African American who served as one of the first black legislators of the Georgia General Assembly. WAB's Dormaya Vance had more from a recent unveiling.
Just over an hour outside of Atlanta, a small group gathers outside the Greene County Courthouse to honor Representative Abram Colby, who served the county after the Civil War.
I believe these kind of things are important because we're not going to be here all the time to tell the story.
Mamie Hillman is the founder of the Greene County African American Museum. She and her team worked alongside the Georgia Historical Society to get an official marker for Colby.
Can you imagine it has taken more than 157 years to acknowledge and honor these men. And he's the first one to have a historical marker.
Colby was a member of the original 33 black legislators elected to the Assembly in 1868, but his story wasn't easily traceable according to researcher Greer Brigham.
The reason for that is how powerful the story is and the danger of his example. of this guy who believed in this expansive view of freedom, not just the Emancipation Proclamation, but economic opportunity, educational opportunity, political opportunity.
The original 33 were expelled from the assembly in late 1868 because of their race. Archives show Colby was racially attacked for his advocacy of black political inclusion. Pam Colby believes her ancestors' story is finally getting the respect it deserves.
He was so selfless and literally he sacrificed himself because he believed in freedom. So to get to this point, all of these years later, it was overwhelming, really.
The marker features some of Abram Colby's successes, including his 1871 federal court testimony on political violence by the Ku Klux Klan. Dormaya Vance, WABE News.
And finally today, when Americans first went to the moon in the 60s, it inspired many young people to pursue careers in science. Through a collaboration between NASA and the Fernbank Science Center, some Metro Atlanta students were able to begin that pursuit early. As Christopher Alston reported, now adults, those same early Fernbank volunteers, hope the recent Artemis II mission will spur renewed interest in space exploration, and the Science Center can continue to be a place to foster that interest.
From even before her days as a student at Cross Keys High School in the late 60s, Mitzi Adams says she's been obsessed with space.
You know, some people were going out on dates and things like that. Nope, I was going to Fernbank every Friday night.
She found herself in good company, among a group of self-described geeks, including Mark Lancaster, now Fernbank's head astronomer. From the time he was 12 and attending Fernbank Elementary across the street, he would also spend his Fridays as an observatory assistant.
I also was just a complete Apollo geek when I was a little kid with my little Major Matt Mason, which is like a G.I. Joe, but it was an Apollo astronaut.
So it was no small thing to him when Fernbank acquired the actual capsule flown for the unmanned Apollo 6 mission, today still a significant draw for visitors. Doug Danielson is a mechanical engineer who was also a young observatory assistant around the same time. It was in large part the Apollo missions that brought this group together and helped solidify their interests.
I would take apart the lawnmower. I mean, just destructive things when I was young, but being able to see these scientific instruments at a young age, that really kind of inspired me because I didn't understand how they were put together, but it intrigued me.
He said it made him want to learn more. He and the other observatory assistants would soon get an opportunity to do so that few others had access to. By this time, Fernbank had partnered with NASA to install an, at the time, cutting-edge image intensifier designed by a group at Georgia Tech. It could make visible to the human eye distant images captured by the Science Center's 36-inch telescope. That allowed them to track the Apollo spacecraft. This was a big deal at the time, as we hear from then Fernbank Administrator Andy Olson in this archived WSB News footage.
We're very fortunate in the fact that the Apollo will pass directly over DeKalb County and the metro Atlanta area before its entrance into lunar trajectory. I think if we're successful in picking up the Apollo craft as it makes its journey from Earth to Moon, this will also be a first as far as what has been available to the observer visually.
Danielson says you couldn't make out much, mostly just bright dots on a dark screen.
It looked like a star, but then there'd be 4 blinking stars around it. And we understood that those were panels that as the stages separated, then there's the one steady one in the middle, and you knew that's where the astronauts were. That was pretty mind-boggling.
One of the most distinctive memories they shared was seeing the onboard explosion that forced Apollo 13 to abort its mission. Here's Adams again.
We saw the debris around Apollo 13. And at the time, we were kind of concerned that we might be the last people to see them while they were alive.
A lot has changed since the Apollo missions. Fernbank's imaging technology might not be considered as state-of-the-art these days, and the Artemis II was so far away it couldn't be tracked on their telescope. But Danielson, who would go on to graduate from Georgia Tech before starting his career at Lockheed Martin, says it remains a place young people can go to get practical scientific experience.
It is really timeless here to put your eye up to that eyepiece and see the rings of Saturn, the photons hitting your eye. I mean, because these days with astronomy, Everybody has remote-controlled telescopes with cameras on them.
Lancaster, Fernbake's astronomer, says he's seen a spike in interest for space travel tied to the Artemis missions. And he says he absolutely sees some of his same younger, geeky self in these future scientists. Mitzi Adams emphasizes the role Fernbank played for so many who went on to pursue careers in science.
Fernbank was really, really important because I was around like-minded people and I was around scientists.
Adams retired in 2024 as NASA's assistant manager of heliophysics and planetary science. And while they all give different reasons for why space travel is still important, from inventions and research to potentially discovering extraterrestrial life or a backup for Earth, all three agree they hope this latest trip around the moon...
All right, Charlie, your Artemis 2 crew is go for launch. Full send.
...will inspire the same awe and wonder that kindled their own fascination as kids. Christopher Alston, WABE News.
That's all for the show this week. My thanks to the WABE News team for all the great work. Reminder, if you are looking for more election coverage ahead of the May 19th primary, including polling locations, candidate profiles, debates, and more, go to wabe.org/2026 I'm Alex Helmick. Thank you for supporting WABE News and listening to The Week in Review.